Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving deep into one of the most profound and mysterious texts ever written, the Sepher Yetzirah. It's also known as the Book of Formation, and believe me, it's a journey. But before we get into the details, I want you to just chew on this one idea for a second. Forget computer code, forget ones and zeros. What if reality itself, what if the entire universe was built from the alphabet? What if letters were the literal source code of existence? Okay, so let's get right into it, because that absolutely wild question is precisely what the Sepher Yetzirah is all about. This isn't just a storybook. It's an ancient text that lays out a vision of the cosmos born not from an explosion, but from a divine act of language. Yeah, you heard that right. In just 6 very short, very dense chapters, this book claims the universe was created using 3 things: numbers, letters, and the words that they form. So it's not just describing reality, it's presenting itself as the actual blueprint, a kind of metaphysical instruction manual where math and language are the tools of creation itself. So how in the world does this cosmic blueprint actually work? Well, the whole system, the entire architecture, rests on something the text calls the 32 paths of wisdom. 32. Remember that number because it is the absolute bedrock of this entire system. It's not just a random number. It represents the sum total of all the forces and channels that structure, well, everything. You can think of these paths as the fundamental principles, almost like the divine wiring of the universe. They're the channels that creative energy flows through in order to take shape and become the reality that we see around us. It's the very scaffolding of existence. And these 32 paths, they break down into 2 distinct groups. First, you've got the 10 Sephiroth. The text calls them ineffable, which is a fancy way of saying they're like pure transcendental concepts or dimensions of divine power. And then you have the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. These are the bezel forces, the actual tangible tools that take those divine ideas and give them form, structure, and substance. And it gets even more specific. Of those 22 letters, 3 are considered the most fundamental, the most powerful. They're like the master keys, the primary source code from which everything else flows. These are known as the 3 mother letters. And listen to how the text itself describes this. It calls it a great, recondite, hidden, and precious secret. These 3 letters, Aleph, Mem, and Shin, they aren't just symbols on a page. They are the actual origin point of the 3 primary elements of all existence. And the connection here is incredibly direct. Aleph, the first letter, literally gives birth to the element of air. Mem, which is a mute or silent letter in Hebrew, corresponds to water. And Shin, with its sharp hissing sound, is the source of fire. I mean, this is cosmic alchemy at its purest, most fundamental level. And what's amazing is that this simple 3-part pattern repeats itself on every level of reality. So in the macrocosm, the universe, these letters create the heavens, the earth, and the atmosphere. In the cycle of time, the year, they create heat, cold, and the balance between them. And in the microcosm of a person, they form the head, the belly, and the chest. It's one single beautiful pattern, just echoing through all of creation. Okay, so if the 22 letters are the basic building blocks, how are they actually put together, right? How does the divine architect use them to build the universe? Well, the answer lies in something the Sepher Yetzirah calls the gates. 231 gates, to be precise. Now, these aren't physical gates you can walk through. They're pathways of combination. They are all the possible pairings of letters that allow creative energy to become an actual manifest thing. The appendix of the book really spells this out. It says that the whole creation and all things proceed from one combination of letters. This isn't a side note, this is the central engine of the entire system. And the math behind it is just so elegant. You just take the 22 letters and you combine them in every possible unique pair. So Aleph with Beth, Aleph with Gimel, all the way down the line. And if you do the math, the total number of unique pairs you can make is exactly 231. Each one of those pairs is a gate, a unique fusion of forces that lets a very specific aspect of reality come into being. Now, this is where we can unlock an even deeper layer of meaning. Because in this whole system, every letter isn't just a sound or a force, it's also a number. And this brings us to the incredible practice of gematria.
So gematria is basically a kind of sacred mathematics. By adding up the numerical values of the letters in a word, you can find other totally different words that have the exact same value. And the idea is that this reveals a hidden conceptual link between them. It's almost like a secret decoder ring for the very text of reality itself.
Let me give you a really cool, concrete example. If you use a reference book like the Sepher Sephiroth, you can find that the Hebrew word for firstborn, which is Bechor, has a numerical value of 228. Now, what's incredible is that the famous phrase Etz Chaim, which means the tree of life, also adds up to exactly 228. So through Gematria, a hidden bridge is revealed, suggesting there's a deep mystical connection between these two incredibly powerful ideas.
So what's the point of all this? What's the big takeaway? Is it just some archaic, dusty cosmology, or is it something more? Well, for the countless mystics and philosophers who've studied it, the answer is pretty clear. I think the 19th century occultist Eliphas Levi really just nailed it. He said, the Sepher Yetzirah is a ladder of truth. He saw it not just as a book about reality, but as a tool, a method, a ladder you could actually climb to understand the fundamental laws of existence for yourself.
In the end, what the Sepher Yetzirah really gives us is this absolutely breathtaking, unified vision of the cosmos. It's a universe where our consciousness, the language we use to think and speak, and the mathematical laws that govern everything, they aren't separate things. They're all woven together into the very fabric of existence. They're the source code, the operating system, and the user interface of reality, all at the same time.
And that, of course, leaves us with a really powerful and maybe even a little bit of an uncomfortable final thought. Because if this ancient text is even metaphorically true, if the words we speak and the thoughts we think have the power to actually shape our world, then we have to ask ourselves a pretty serious question. What reality are you creating? Right here, right now, with every single word you choose?